Hey guys, welcome to the Hearthstone Arena video guide series where you learn how to get good at the arena. My name is Merps. I am the curator of the lightforge.com tier list along with Advocata. You can find both of us streaming on twitch.tv/grinninggoat. And if you have any questions or comments about this video series from me, you can find me at twitter.com/merps4248. Let's begin. All right, so it's going to be a 5-part video series, and I'd like to lay out what you can expect from this series. First, we're going to go through some introduction, terminology, and a discussion of the meta and what is the meta. Next, we are going to go through drafting your deck and what you should consider while drafting. Third, we are going to go into turn planning and what you should be thinking about when you are playing your cards. Fourth, it's going to be playing your opponent, which is making reads on their hand, reading the situation, and proper risk assessment. And fifth, this video is going to be called the Arc of Progress. And I decided to make this at the end because progress and improvement is kind of vague and it's hard to come by. It's very hard sometimes for people to jump into something and immediately see I have to do A, B, and C in that order in order to get better at something. So I made that video to help people out, no matter what step they're in, to get better. All right. Before we begin, I want to explain that I expect you to have a basic understanding of Hearthstone's mechanics. You don't have to be a pro. I obviously don't expect you to be a pro, but I expect you to be knowledgeable about the mana system and about how turns work, etc. So I'm hoping that you also played or watched a few arena runs. And the reason for this is because I want you to have a good understanding of how the turns work out in the arena, what you can kind of expect. This just gives you a better understanding of what I'm talking about, and it allows you to apply what I'm talking about to situations that you've either played or seen. Same for knowing the majority of the cards. It just helps out whenever I explain things for you to visualize this. Now, this video series is not meta-specific, so that means I will not be talking about specific cards, and I will not be teaching you how to exactly succeed in the current meta. The reason I did that was because I don't want this series to be dated. I don't want it to be at a certain point, not applicable. I want people to come back to this video series months or years from now and be able to apply what I said here to the current Hearthstone arena, because what I teach you here are fundamentals, are good fundamentals that are applicable in any meta. Having said that, the stuff that I will be talking about is my own opinion. This is from my own mind. There are going to be topics that people will wonder why I didn't include. There will be topics that I did include that people will wonder why I explain it in this way and not that way. We only have a limited amount of time, so this is the way that I chose to do it. And lastly, when you are listening to this presentation, engage in active learning. When I list an example or when I talk about things, try to think about, okay, did this happen to me before? How can I apply it to runs that I've played previously and to runs later on? Active learning is always the best. Let's explain some of the terminology first. The first thing is going infinite. This is something you hear a lot, and it's the goal of arena players. Because when you enter the arena, it costs either $2 in real money or 150 gold. And what you get back if you go 7 wins is at least a card pack and 150 gold. So if you are able to consistently get above 7 wins, you can go infinite, which means you can just keep on playing the arena without doing anything extra, without putting anything extra in there. Now, there are ways to go soft infinite by using quests and everything, but we don't need to get into that. I think basically everyone's goal is to average above 7 wins, and then after that, perhaps go even further beyond. Now, let's talk about some terms that people use, not just in Hearthstone Arena, but in other card games. I will certainly be using these terms, so I want to give a brief, very brief explanation of these terms. Mostly because you can actually spend an entire 1-hour video just on each one of these terms. But we don't have that time. You guys don't want to listen to that. So, let's talk about tempo. Tempo is loosely defined as readily available board resources. Now, what this means is this is stuff that you have readily available on the board. And board includes you as well, so you with a weapon equipped that you're able to use, right? So what tempo is not, that is not the 8 cards in your hand that you have not spent mana to use yet, right? That's not tempo. Those cards can eventually become tempo, but they're not tempo yet, okay? So if you have a minion on the board, that's tempo. If you have a weapon equipped, that's tempo. If you heal your face, you have done something interacting on the board. You know, you have perhaps used a card to heal your face. You've used mana to do that as well, but that's not tempo because you haven't added something that's readily available to use, right? Once again, loose term. Let's just move on. Next is card advantage and value. These are obviously tied together. Card advantage is just card advantage. It's in the name itself. Whoever has a card advantage has more cards, which means overall more resources and options. Card advantage doesn't necessarily mean counting the cards in each other's hands, and whoever has the more cards is winning the card advantage there. If you have a big 7/7 minion on the board, well, that's more than one average card, so you should count that within your card advantage calculations as well. And bigger than card advantage is just value. This is just your overall options, right? Like, that's what value is. So you can have a ton of value, and what that means is you have a ton of options and resources. That's all the explanation that we need for those right now. Let's go to 3 architects that are commonly thrown around that you'll see, and it's important for you to identify these, but you don't need to strictly define these. Now, it's aggro decks, mid-range decks, and control decks. Aggro decks are typically decks with very short mana curves, lots of small mana minions. You flood out onto the board, you might use some board control in the first few turns, but you're trying to turn that early tempo into face damage, and you want to kill your opponent before they can properly respond. Mid-range decks are tempo decks. You want to put minions out onto the board, not as fast as the aggro player, but what you want to do is you want to use your mana efficiently and through your board presence be able to pressure your opponent, and you have a lot of flexibility because you're mid-range. Control decks, it's exactly what the name implies. You are looking to control the game state. You're looking to control the board. You're looking to sort of hold off on what your opponent is trying to do so you can eventually win the value game. You're trying to win through card advantage, overall value, and you typically have a lot of removals. You typically have a lot of things to stop your opponent from doing what they are trying to do. Okay, once again, loose terminology. We can spend an hour talking about this, but we won't. Let's talk about the meta. This is probably the term that is used the most in Hearthstone Arena, and maybe the term that's the least understood. Once again, loosely, the definition of the meta is the game outside of the game. Now, what does that mean? It means if you have a card that is just a vanilla 4 attack, 5 health, well, it's really the view of that card by human beings. The meta is how do other humans play. It's the human influence on the game itself, right? Let's think about rock, paper, scissors. Now, rock, paper, scissors, if you just look at the game itself, well, rock beats scissors, scissors beats paper, paper beats rock. And it's a 33% chance, right? Now, the meta of rock, paper, scissors is if, as a human being, you look at other humans and see that people are throwing rocks a lot more often. Now, what does this mean? This means that you should throw paper. And you should also keep up because it's going to shift. Because as more people shift to paper, more people are going to shift to scissors. So you need to react. And that's the meta, right? It's not as simple as rock, paper, scissors and you just seeing what is being thrown more often. But that's a pretty decent example of what the meta includes. It's stuff that's outside of the game. You're trying to think about what humans are doing. Now, what's the importance of understanding the meta? It's not that important unless you're at very high wins. That's really the truth. And it's part of the reason why I'm not, this video series is not meta specific. I think a lot of people put so much importance on understanding the meta, when they just really need at first a basic understanding of the game. So, how do you figure out the meta? Well, you can watch streamers, and I'll talk about this later on in the last part of the episode. But you do not want to focus on the meta too much if you're just starting to play, okay? And that's what's important. When you have become an infinite player, that's when you can really focus on the meta. Okay, so having said that, let's think about how to improve. See you in the next part 2, where we talk about drafting.